What kind of peace activists use knives, clubs, fire from weapons stolen from soldiers, and other weapons to attack soldiers who board the ship in accordance with international law?
The United States is deeply disturbed by the recent violence and regrets the tragic loss of life and injuries suffered among those involved in the incident last night aboard the Gaza-bound ships.
No state is above the law. Israel must be prepared to face the consequences and be held accountable for its crimes.
Part of the emergency UN Security Council meeting about this Israeli commando raid that happened on 6 ships trying to break the blockade around Gaza. They're Turkish vessels. The Israeli Navy SEALs went onto these ships, and we have video of some of that provided by the Israeli Defense Force. As they went on, you can see the movement here. They were caught off guard and overwhelmed. Some of the demonstrators on board, according to the Israelis, attacked them with steel bars and knives. There's video of this. The Navy commander then gave an order to open fire after several of the Israeli SEALs reported their handguns were taken from them and were being fired by the activists. 9 demonstrators in all of this were killed, 4 Israeli SEALs wounded by the gunfire and stab wounds. What about all of this, the international reaction? Let's bring in our panel. Bill Crystal, editor of the Weekly Standard, A.B. Stoddard, associate editor of The Hill, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. I should say Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu decided to postpone his trip to Washington. He has gone back to Israel to deal with this situation and not meet with President Obama tomorrow. Charles.
The fundamental deception here is the use of the word humanitarian. As we saw, humanitarians don't wield iron clubs and would have killed the Israelis had the Israelis not drawn their pistols in self-defense. But there's a larger issue here. What exactly is the humanitarian crisis that the flotilla was actually addressing? There is none. There's no one starving in Gaza. The Gazans have been supplied with food and social services, education by the UN, by UNRWA, for 60 years, in part with American tax money. Second, when there are humanitarian needs, the Israelis allow every day food and medicine overland into Gaza. The reason that it did not want to allow this flotilla is because, as the spokesman for the flotilla said herself, this was not about humanitarian relief, it was about breaking the blockade. And the reason the Israelis have a blockade is because they only want to allow humanitarian supplies and not weaponry. Look, the proof of that is the fact that if you look at a map of Gaza, you'll see that Israelis only control 3 sides of this rectangle. There's a 4th side on the Egyptian side. So it is an Egyptian-Israeli blockade. The Egyptians have the same problem with Gaza. People accuse Israeli of having a blockade because they're racist, they're anti-Muslim, anti-Arab. The Egyptians are Muslim and Arab, and they've gone to war 3 times on behalf of the Palestinians. So why do they have exactly the same blockade? Because Gaza is run by Hamas, a terror entity that wants to import weaponry and resume the war against Israel. The man who made the announcement that we saw earlier on explaining the commando raid is the defense minister of Israel. He's not a right-winger. He's not Likud. He's Ehud Barak, who's the leader of Labor, the party of Yitzhak Rabin, Golda Meir, the party of the left. And the man who 10 years ago this summer offered the Palestinians a peace agreement that would have had a Palestinian state, division of Jerusalem, and an end of the conflict. The Palestinians said no. And Gaza, 2 years ago, declared war on Israel. That's why you've got a blockade, and the flotilla was not about humanitarian needs. It was about smashing the blockade.
A.B., the U.S. representative in that emergency meeting said that the United States is deeply disturbed and wants transparency. What about the administration's response to this and where this goes from here?
Well, I thought it was interesting the American ambassador also condemned Hamas for interfering with shipments into Gaza. Again, trying to sort of be cautious, saying we need more facts here, condemning the violence, but also trying to stay on both sides. The question now, of course, is what is happening with the U.S.-Israeli standoff, the very tense relations. The Prime Minister was not able to have this very important meeting, face-to-face meeting with President Obama tomorrow. He's returning back to Israel, although Obama now has this meeting scheduled with President Abbas to discuss, among other things, next week, a Palestinian state. Where does this leave U.S.-Israeli relations, which are in deep trouble right now? And I think that becomes the central question. How will the Obama administration respond to this in the hours and days to come? Will they actually at any point show solidarity with Israel, which is claiming that it was acting in self-defense, or will continue to put more distance between the two countries and complicate the strained relations further?
Bill, the rhetoric is obviously going through the roof here. Turkish foreign minister said it's a murder conducted by a state. The Palestinians are saying it's a war crime. You can see how this could escalate dramatically by this incident.
You could, though. I was struck that the UN Security Council meeting just now ended without the adoption of a resolution. It strikes me that perhaps the U.S. is refusing to endorse a one-sided resolution. Perhaps everyone has the sense that, you know what, this was a mischievous, to say the least, malicious effort to tempt the Israelis or to lure them into a trap where something bad would happen, and that's happened. And I think grown-ups in Europe, however much they're, want to posture as being anti-Israel, know that nothing is to be accomplished here by passing some resolution or letting the rhetoric get out of hand. So I rather suspect, actually, after a day or two, this dies down in the chanceries and foreign ministries of serious countries. Hamas runs Gaza. That's the problem. And Iran has consistently been trying to supply Hamas with arms. Israel got out of Gaza. Israel would love it. Israel would love to have nothing to do with Gaza ever again. Israel would love to build a 30-foot wall around the borders it has with Gaza and pay no attention to the place ever. Let the Egyptians worry about it, and let all the Arab states who care so much, allegedly, about these refugees worry about it. The trouble is, from Gaza, they launch rockets into Israel. So Israel has to care about what comes into Gaza, and they can't leave the seacoast open. So I actually think this might die down. The one place that has serious implications, I think, is Turkey. Historically, a friend of, or at least a country that has had good relations with Israel, a NATO ally of ours, that permitted this ship to leave from Turkey. European countries would not permit this flotilla to leave. They knew this was a troublemaking effort. As Charles said, they can get plenty of humanitarian aid into Gaza. If they want more humanitarian aid to Gaza, airlift in 5 million tons of nice goods, and the Israelis will just take a look and make sure they're not arms and let them go through the checkpoint. This checkpoint is open. Stuff goes through it every day. Turkey is the question to me. Does this mean a real continuation of a turn against Israel by the Turkish government?
Quickly, Charles, the Prime Minister has put off his trip here. There wasn't really an upside, a lot of optimism about the peace process as it stood right now. But does this somehow change the equation?
In the absence of the incident, you would have had a meeting tomorrow between the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of the United States. It would have been a make-up. There would have been a nice photo op. The administration is intent on warming the relations after it was in a deep freeze, probably in part because of upcoming elections, and that now is off. But I am somewhat encouraged by the fact that the U.S. has not joined the lynch mob at the UN attacking Israel, and is thus so far held off. I hope it will exercise a veto if it has to, because Israel clearly is a victim here. If these people had wanted humanitarian aid, Israel offered to take the ships into Haifa peacefully, unload all the stuff inside, and to allow all the humanitarian aid immediately into Gaza, all the food and medicine, and it was refused because it was meant to be a provocation and to create an incident.
Tell us what you think the U.S. should do in response to this incident. Vote in our online poll, our homepage at foxnews.com/special report.